It's a hockey, you know, it's only a game.
Young men expressing themselves for joy.
Why do you have to be mad?
These guys are jerks.
It's only a game.
It's a cheap, dirty game.
It's only a game.
Why do you have to be mad?
Hello, KKUPFL fans, and welcome to episode 2 of the 2021 season of Mark Callanáin's Keeping Karlsson Ultimate Patron Fantasy League Stat Attack podcast, presented by jnsoftware.ca, powered by Kevin Hebert. I'm your host, John Neuhold. Thank you for joining us. Normally, I'd say that last week in the KKUPFL, half the teams won and the other half lost. But this week, we had a tie. Let's dig in. On today's show, we'll be reviewing the exciting goings-on in Tier 1, as one manager has separated himself from the pack in the quest to become the ultimate fantasy hockey champion. We'll also get into the intense trade market that's developed. Next, we'll spend a short time examining one of the features of the recently announced KKUPFL.com website. Then, Marcas has a fascinating interview with Julien, who's not new to fantasy, but is to the KKUPFL, so we'll get his fresh perspective. After that, we'll dive into the Stat Attack deep end with details on players, including naming the fantasy team of the week, and finish off the show with Manager's Corner, where we'll review the Fast Track Leaderboard, the Manager of the Week, and the Matchup of the Week. First off, it's our Tier 1 update and the chase for the ultimate prize in fantasy hockey. We're down to just one undefeated team, with Dustin and his team Primo Pasta at 3-0 after what should have been a close matchup against Stream Scheme host Dave Betton turned into a blowout, as Dustin got huge performances from Pasternak and solid production from the rest of his team, including $33 waiver wire pickup from the previous week, Yossi Puljujärvi, while Dave's heavy investment in Philadelphia players underperformed during the week. And then on Sunday, when it seemed everyone on Philadelphia was putting up big points, Dave's combination of Voracek, Patrick, and Gostisbehere seemed to work hard to avoid getting in on the action, combining for only 5.5 KKUPFL points, while last-minute returnee from injury Couturier picked up 13.25 points, but languished on Dave's bench. This week's highlighted Tier 1 matchup is the self-proclaimed Battle of the Buds between Short Shift's hosts Ben and Lewis. Both at 1-1 coming into the week, Lewis got out to a roaring 55.25 to 13.95 point lead on Monday, with all but one of his 9 skaters getting at least one goal or assist. A fairly even Tuesday, with Josh Anderson's 2-goal game for Lewis being matched by Ben's 2-goal Christian Dvorak, and a relatively quiet Wednesday saw Lewis going into Thursday with a dominant 50-point lead. But then the comeback was on. On Thursday, Ben dodged a bullet by starting Shesterkin and Vanacek, who combined for 12.3 points, while benching Saros, who gave up 5 goals on 19 shots for a negative 3.35 point performance. A 22-point night from Philip Forsberg and another big night from Dvorak trimmed Lewis's lead to under 20. Then on Friday, performances from Barkov and Pacioretty and fresh pickup Cody Glass blew Lewis out of the water, flipping the matchup to a narrow lead in favor of Ben. But Lewis wasn't done yet. His Pittsburgh combo of Malkin and Gensel finally woke up on Saturday and combined for 15.5 points on a day that would see him retake the lead by almost 15 points. Ben, however, was all in on trying to win. Despite Christian Dvorak putting up 33 KKUPFL points in the prior 3 games, a big 0 on Saturday saw him dumped to the waiver wire for Dustin Brown to get 1 extra game played on Sunday. Although behind by nearly 15 points, Ben had to be confident going into Sunday. He had twice as many games on his schedule compared to Lewis, and Lewis was starting guys like Dylan Strome, while Ben had Barkov, Pacioretty, Hamilton, and a ton of other players, all capable of big games. Plus, his ace in the hole, Washington goalie Vitek Vanacek, who Ben had streamed in a few weeks previous and had been riding to great success. But the day started off strange for Ben. Vanacek got blown out by the Flyers and wound up with negative 4.5 points. Then Mantha got scratched just before his game started. With most of the games going on simultaneously at 3 p.m., the action was frantic. Assists rolled in for Ben from Cody Glass and Pacioretty, a goal from Kempe, one of each from Dougie Hamilton. But little did anyone notice that earlier in the week, Lewis had quietly grabbed Carolina's Jordan Staal off waivers without any competing bids. And on Sunday, Staal exploded for 1 goal and 2 assists, giving him 12.5 KKUPFL points on the day and leading Lewis to an 11.55 point victory over Ben for the week. Having relegated his friend to a 1-2 record while going to 2-1 himself, Lewis said he'd be hard-pressed to describe last week as fun. But he's pretty proud to have come out on top after the incredible comeback Ben staged after his near-perfect Monday and Tuesday. He's said that in this shortened season, they won't have another opportunity to match up against each other during the regular season, but he feels he'll sleep better playing against other opponents instead of this week's tense matchup against Ben. The most statistically unlikely fact about Tier 1 this week? The good news is, everyone is in the win column with no 0-3 teams in the division. Normally, I would find this statistically unlikely, but I think it's a testament to the high quality of competition among these managers. Next, we're going to highlight one of the trades that happened this week in Tier 1. Those who keep an eye on the trades channel in the KKUPFL Discord will have noticed a trade between Ben and Jordan was announced on Thursday, where Ben agreed to take Buchnevich and $5 of fab for Yamamoto. Our story begins Thursday morning as a weary Ben Burnett wakes up thinking about how dreadful it's been trying to get a handle on his KKUPFL team this year. From 12th in points week 1 to 1st last week, and then 13th 3 days into week 3. But he's not one to sit around and wait for things to improve on their own. He decides then and there that it's time for action, that he needs to be pretty aggressive to improve his team, finding every ounce of value, even in marginal moves. It was time to look for overperformers on his roster who might not be able to keep up their pace. One name stood out among the rest. It called out to him from his Yahoo roster screen. Yamamoto. Is he super talented? Yes. Is he worthy of great deployment? Yes. And Ben was optimistic pre-season that he'd stick in that power play 1 role in Edmonton. But it's just been a revolving door so far this year. It's time for Ben to go out and try to find some value for him. Ben is a Rangers fan and knows Buchnevich has seen action on the top power play recently, and he thinks he's been the best winger not named Panarin on that team. Knowing Jordan is an Oilers fan and that Jordan had already offered a trade earlier in the year for Yamamoto, he decided to start there. Jordan's previous Yamamoto offer was for Hoffman. This time, Ben asked for Buchnevich and some fab. Even though he viewed it as a fairly lateral move, at least Buchnevich's deployment was more to Ben's liking, and the fab is a nice sweetener. Jordan believes in Buchnevich, but since he watches all the Oilers games, he's big on Yamamoto's upside, especially since he plays with Draisaitl in the Canadian division. Plus, he loves the idea of picking up players that went for more in the draft. Trade away a $3 Buchnevich for an $11 Yamamoto? Yes, sir. They agreed to the deal, and it was posted in the trades channel on Discord. But there's a twist. Dave, seeing the trade posted in the Tier 1 channel on Discord, immediately sprung into action. He valued Yamamoto very highly, and could offer, in his opinion, much better players in exchange. So he immediately sent a slew of counteroffers to Ben. If you're not up to speed on that feature of the KKUPFL, either manager involved in a trade may cancel said trade within 24 hours of it having been accepted, in order to accept another offer from a different manager for the exact same players included in the initial trade. Dave knew convincing Ben, the Rangers fan, that Buchnevich wasn't the right player for him would be hard. In fact, there's probably nothing Dave could say that could sway Ben. He'd need outside intervention. And then he got it. That night, Buchnevich got dropped off the top power play and played 3 minutes less than his previous season low time on ice. Ben says he doesn't usually react to just one game of data, but also being a Rangers fan, thinks he shouldn't have trusted David Quinn's deployment of Buchnevich in the first place. So while he believes Buchnevich has hit another level this year, his ceiling remains limited if Quinn doesn't see him as a staple on the top power play unit. Meanwhile, Dave had offered Konechny, who showed last year that he could reach the ceiling he'd hoped Buchnevich could. So Ben reached out to Dave and said he'd accept the deal. Yamamoto for Konechny, straight up. Long-term production wasn't the only factor for Ben, though. Locked in his death struggle against Lewis, he knew that swapping deals would mean processing took another day. He'd get an extra day of Yamamoto and a game from Konechny on Sunday. While that part of the deal didn't work out, with the two of them combining for all of 1 KKUPFL point across their 2 games, he's hopeful Konechny will outperform Yamamoto and Buchnevich over the long term. Dave understands Konechny could pick things up again with Couturier returning, but feels a lot more comfortable with the consistency of Yamamoto and the much safer schedule of the North Division. Next up is this week's KKUPFL.com website highlight. This week we're going to highlight the Player Stats screen on KKUPFL.com. Under the Stat Attack menu is Player Stats. This screen contains a chart that can help you understand how players are rostered, as well as analyze their performance down to the individual stat category level. You can scroll through a list of every player on a KKUPFL roster, or limit the list by player name or position in the filters at the top. Beside each player, you'll see their position and total KKUPFL points earned this season. Next are percentages, showing that player's percent rostered across all KKUPFL divisions, the percent rostered on Yahoo, and a column called Delta, which shows you the difference between the two. You can sort by any of these numerical columns using drop-down lists at the top of the chart. So sorting by Delta in descending order, for example, tells me that while Jesse Puljujärvi is rostered in every KKUPFL division, he's only been picked up in 20% of Yahoo leagues overall. Could he be worth a look in any of your other leagues? The final numerical column is ADP, showing you the average draft position of that player in this year's KKUPFL snake drafts. The last component of this chart is a fantastic breakdown of how many KKUPFL points this player has tallied this year. A stacked bar graph with different colors representing each stat type, you can see not just how this player performs against his peers, but also where his value this year has originated from. Is this defender all points and no periffs? Is this forward a high-volume shooter? Analyze players to see who might be over or underperforming. Make sure to check out KKUPFL.com and attack your stats. On this week's guest interview, Julien is a Habs fan from Gatineau, Quebec, and new to the KKUPFL. He's a huge hockey fan for all his life, who has played fantasy hockey for many years, but this is his first league with peripherals, so he's had to adjust to that difference. Over to you, Mark.
This week's guest on the KKUPFL Stat Attack podcast is Julienne Pacquiao from Gatineau, Quebec. Julien, you are very welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks, Mark. Thanks for having me.
It's a pleasure. Julien, you are the manager of Arctic Donkeys in Fila in Tier 6 of the KKUPFL. It is your first season in the KKUPFL, so you're very welcome. You're a new player, and I'm delighted to get some insights from you into how you found this season and how you find the league in general. So just as a general introduction, your name is Julien. You're from Gatineau, as I mentioned. Your team name is the Arctic Donkeys. It's your first season. Can you just maybe tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, your NHL team, if you have one, and things like that?
I'm from Gatineau, as you said. It's about 10 minutes. I live about 10 minutes from downtown Ottawa, so our beautiful nation's capital. Yeah, I grew up obsessing over hockey. I've played basically all my life, and at some points I rallied to the family passion for the Montreal Canadiens, and I ended up cheering for them. Crazy story a bit. I was trying to be a contrarian. I grew up really enjoying Paul Kariya and the Mighty Ducks, but at some point Jose Theodore scored a goal, and I saw that on the on the replays in the morning after, and I just like, well, their goalie can score a goal, so yeah, I've got no reason not to cheer for this team now.
It's always funny how little things like that, happen from time to time, just seem so incredible and amazing to a child, and it kind of steers your whole life. Then it can spark a lifelong passion for a team. How have you felt about the Habs so far this season? I know they're playing at the moment. We're recording on Saturday evening. They're playing against Ottawa, in fact. How have you found their start to the season? They've been pretty hot so far.
Yeah, they've done well. To me, they've done surprisingly well. I've had a kind of a rocky relationship with my fandom of this team since the Shea Weber PK Subban trade. I even for about a year, I proclaimed myself a Winnipeg Jets fan. But I still feel this trade has been made with an old mentality of valuing grit over skill and speed. I don't know. I feel like they've done individual moves that have worked out really well, like the Domi Galchenyuk trade, and I feel like they didn't have a structured plan, a clear plan to what they were trying to accomplish, other than accumulating assets in the Pacioretty trade, for example. But yeah, they're proving me wrong big time this year. They're doing really great, and it's a really fun team to watch.
Yeah, and so far this season they've had some outstanding individual performances. If we look at fantasy in particular, so the likes of Tyler Toffoli, Petri, Anderson, Nick Suzuki, who's an exciting rookie. Do you think all of those are sustainable, or are there any players maybe who you think might drop off? I know Jeff Petri has another goal tonight.
Yeah, well, I'd say for the most part it's sustainable. Not Jeff Petrie won't keep going on 100 points pace. If he keeps playing on the top power play, you'll keep getting points. And if we talk about peripherals, they look pretty similar to what he's been doing in the last few years. His hits are even a bit down, but that might be a product of the team controlling the play a little more. And I really like Nick Suzuki as well. He took a big step in the bubble last summer, and this wasn't just a blip or anything like that. He's got the trust from Claude Julien, the coach, which hasn't always been the case for young players in Montreal, especially centers. So he's getting plenty of opportunities to produce. So I really believe he can keep it going.
Suzuki was a guy who I actually targeted late on in a few of my drafts. Now, I was hoping to take him towards the end of each one, but somebody seemed to get there just a little bit ahead of me in each case. So I kind of regret that now, having seen how well he has started. Can I just ask?
I tried not to overreact to the bubble, and I said, like, I better avoid him just to not overvalue him. And yeah, I regret it as well.
Can I just ask you on that? So you're a Habs fan. Obviously, they're playing in the Canadian or the North Division so far. Have you any insight or any ideas into why that division in particular has been so high scoring?
It was a talk during the off season, like we should maybe value a little bit more players from the North Divisions because most of their defensive system is suspicious at best. So like even for good teams like Toronto, and you combine that with high-end talent up front with like Matthews, Peterson, Gaudreau, and the top six in Winnipeg, it's just a goalie's nightmare, isn't it?
Yeah, it's very fair. A lot of those teams are quite top heavy in terms of having, high paid, high talent forwards, but maybe leaving a little bit to be desired on the back end. Like the goalies, I feel sorry for the goalies. A lot of them are obviously very talented and very underguarded, let's say, in terms of how well they're protected by their decor.
And then you play Ottawa like 8 or 9 times.
Yeah, that's very true. So let's get into your fantasy hockey career so far. I mentioned earlier it's your first year in the KKUPFL. How long have you been playing fantasy hockey overall?
I've always made drafts with friends of my father for a playoff pool. But I've been playing season-long fantasy hockey more seriously for about 7 or 8 years now. Okay,
and are you into other fantasy sports, or is it solely fantasy hockey?
It's only hockey. I enjoy other sports, but I don't know enough about them and the players to get into fantasy.
And in terms of video games, do you play any NHL video games on consoles or maybe simulators?
Yeah, I play. I've got the NHL 21. It was the first time in a couple of years that I bought the NHL game because I thought they were the same from year to year. Like there was no major improvements, and then they seem to have a couple new things this year that made me want to buy it. And I play also Madden and a bit of NBA 2K. Yeah,
last year actually during the lockdown here in Ireland, I went out and bought a PlayStation 4. Back in March last year, and the only game I had on it was NHL 21. So I got pretty into that for a few months, and then real life resumed, and I haven't played it since probably August or so. But I really enjoyed it. It had probably been a lot longer since I last played NHL compared to you. So first and foremost,
you probably beat me anyway, so I'm not really good.
I got really good. I got really, really good. But there was a couple of months at the start where I just couldn't win a game. Like I was being demolished every time I played somebody online. But I was pretty impressed with how well I could pick it up after a couple of months of being what would we call me, a whipping boy. Just so if we can move on then, just to have a look. So you're obviously quite a big hockey fan in general. You're a Habs fan, but you're a hockey fan. And that comes first and foremost ahead of being a fantasy hockey player, I would say, with you, or do you consider yourself more of a fantasy hockey player?
Oh yeah, no, I'm a hockey fan. Hockey has been a passion pretty much since I was born. NHL teams are among the first words I could say if my parents are to be believed. I've got a set of hockey cards from I think my uncle or something, and they were teaching me all the team's name and some players' name as well. So yeah, it's been there ever since I was born.
That's funny. Hockey cards actually are probably the main reason I ever got into hockey as well. When I went on a family holiday to Calgary in 1998, and there was a store just around the corner from us where I could get like 5 old packs for $1, and I used to go in every day with like $3, and I'd go home or back to that place I was staying and open them, and I'd know none of the names, but I'd just be fascinated by like the points totals on the back of the card, or funny names or the pictures. So
funny names are the best.
Yeah.
My favorite growing up was always Jaromir Jagr. Just the way it was spelled, I thought that was just incredible for French Canadian.
The double J.
Yeah.
So let's have a look at the KKUPFL. So as I mentioned, you joined for the first time this year. How have you found it so far? How do you find the league compared to maybe other leagues that you're in?
It's interesting because it's the first time I'm playing in a league that counts peripheral stats. I never played before in a league that counts stats like shots and hits. It was just mostly points
Standard.
and power play points, game-winning goals and stuff like that. It's been really interesting, and it's hard to adjust, but I think I'm doing okay so far.
Just joining a league with those peripherals that you'd never done before, did you have to kind of tailor your preparation, or did you have to change how you prepared for the league?
A little bit. I had to be more attentive to some stats that I didn't look before, like players. Trying to think of a name. The player that like Ben Sherratt or Darnell Nurse is pretty valuable in the league, like the KKUPFL, but in just points league, they're not even worth a roster spot. So
yeah, so there are that kind of that small niche subset of players who will get you enough points from the peripherals alone to be worth rostering, but you wouldn't necessarily have ever known them in any other type of fantasy league.
Yeah, but I had more homeworks to do, but the way that I prepared myself was pretty similar.
Yeah, Ben Sherratt and Darnell Nurse are good examples. Nurse this season probably has more to his scoring in terms of getting on the score sheet. But Sherratt last season was a good example. He was somebody who I streamed in, and another guy who comes to mind is the likes of, not necessarily this season, but last season, Mark Borowiecki. I found that he was a guy who I went to in a number of leagues to fill in those peripheral categories. Would you consider yourself a patient manager, Julien, or are you quick to cut your underperforming players?
Yeah, I qualify myself as an hyperactive GM. Okay. I'm not necessarily impatient or anything like that, but I like to shake things up from time to time. I like to make trades, and that has led to a few bad decisions in the last few years. But and I always look at the free agent pool, and I always want that shiny new guy that's not on my team. And maybe it's a mistake, but it's more for me I overthink things sometimes, and I try to avoid this guy that could be really good. I want to prevent it from getting on another guy's team more than I want him on my team. That's, if that makes any sense. But
yes. So you're looking to accrue players to prevent other people from having them, rather than for the sake of your team. So actually a related question that Elan actually has suggested that I ask on this podcast, and I think it's a really good one, is if you were to imagine a spectrum of so say player A is somebody who likes using their moves to improve their team in the long term, and player B is somebody who uses their moves to maximize the number of games they're playing each week. Would you be more towards player A or player B? Which of the two do you think is closest to your style?
That's an interesting question. I think it depends. It depends on how your roster is built for me. If I'm not happy with the bottom of my roster, if I don't like the players on there, I'll stream as much as possible. If I can find guys on the waiver wire that I like and that I think could help me on the long term, I fill those spots, and then I might be a little more quiet on this front for a bit of time. But yeah, I do a bit of both. I see the value in streaming, and I'm learning that in the KKUPFL how much it can be valuable. If you have guys that, like, I just picked up Jake Muzzin on the waiver wire, and I think it could be a guy that's really helpful for the long haul. So
very good. So let's have a look at your KKUPFL team then. So in the draft, you picked up 4 players who were center only, 3 goaltenders, only 4 D-men, and you picked up 2 halves. In terms of the 2 halves, was that more of a head or a heart decision, and are you happy with those decisions?
Yeah, well, I gotta say I'm happy to have any players from the North Division right now, because they seem to be the only ones where the games aren't postponed.
Yeah.
But it was a head decision, I'd say. Like I said, I've been a bit unsatisfied with the way this team has been run in the last few years. So I have tend to undervalue them a lot in the last few years, especially since most of the guys who I'm playing fantasy with are also Habs fan, and they always overvalue them. So I let them pick these players early, and I try to take players that are less known to the guys around me. So yeah, but I felt like the North Division would score a lot, and Tatar and Weber were available at spots where I thought that was pretty reasonable for me to pick them. So I took them basically.
Very good. So let's go through your draft then. So Brad Marchand, first pick. So you were 8th in the draft order. Then next pick, Dougie Hamilton as your second pick. Had you planned, was that a strategy to take a D-man quite early on, or did it just happen that he fell to you and you were happy to take him?
Yeah, it's a little bit of that. I came into this draft with a mindset of trying to basically get the best value over replacement. And I had a group of 4 D-men I had identified that would be a stretch above the other guys. If they all went before my second pick, I would probably have taken a forward. I was looking at guys like Gensel, Tavares, Brady Tkachuk, and
so the group of 4 D-men that you were looking at, would that have included the likes of Yossi, Carlson, Hedman, and Hamilton? Is that who you were looking for?
Not Hedman, but I think I had Burns in that group for this year. But Hedman is a pretty good option if you end up having him as a number 1 defenseman. So if all of those 4 guys were taken, I was looking at a forward, but I would have tried to get Hedman in the 3rd or 4th round.
Okay, very good. And let's have a look then. So you went, after Hamilton, you went Max Pacioretty. 4th round, you took probably a little bit of a risk on Mike Hoffman, depending on when your draft took place. Had he signed for the Blues at that stage?
Yeah, we the division was added really late, so we drafted this Sunday before the season started. So he had signed with the Blues, and
so you've actually traded him just this week. You've traded him for Conor Garland. Are you happy with that exchange? Obviously, you must be if you accepted the offer.
Yeah, it didn't work out at all in the 4th round to pick Mike Hoffman. I felt the Blues signed him to be power play specialist basically, and like the Panthers had used him. So I thought, he'd get a lot of shots and get some points. But I've accepted the offer on Tuesday night. I thought about it long and hard, and he was still on the 3rd line playing on power play 2, and then I compared Garland to him. Garland is on line 1 in Arizona and power play 1. I felt like Garland's at a better floor with all the shots he's taking and the opportunity is given. So maybe Hoffman has a better ceiling, but I don't feel that that ceiling is significantly better for this year. So I was happy to take Garland.
Yeah, I think Garland is probably one of those guys that Arizona see themselves building a team around for the next few years. He's a talented young player who they're happy to put first and foremost in their lineup each night. Let's keep going there. So Dylan Larkin, you took next of all. Jordan Binnington was your first goaltender in the 6th round at 77th pick. Were you planning on taking a goalie that early, or how did that work out?
I fell for the whole goalie run. Basically, I wanted to have a number 1 guy from a good team, and all the other guys I had spotted were being taken. So Frederick Anderson, Gary Price, and all those guys. And then I saw Binnington. I was like, oh, you know what? That's the last guy of the group remaining. And again, that came with my mentality of value over replacement, and it was probably a mistake. Is when you got John Gibson that went, I think, in the 9th round or something.
Yeah, and then your other 2 goalies who you drafted in the 12th and 15th rounds, neither of those guys remain on your roster at this moment. So you've dropped Jussi Saros and Cal Peterson.
Yeah, I had hopes that they would. Jussi Saros had an incredible year last year, and I think I thought he would give me some great numbers. But so far, Nashville has been scoring a lot of goals, but giving a lot of goals as well. It seems like they would fit just well in the North Division.
Yeah. Let's have a look at your 8th round pick. So Oliver Ekman Larson, who has missed a significant amount of time already this season. You would consider him a big loss, I would assume.
Of course, he started really well, but that pick is a funny story. Actually, I was during the draft. I was in a week away in a cottage with my girlfriend, and the Wi-Fi was terrible, and I ended up losing connection for when my pick came. And OEL was the first guy in my queue list. I had a lot of guys there, and it wasn't in any particular order, just players of the Yahoo list that I wanted to not forget about. It could have been worse, but yeah, it wasn't necessarily the guy I wanted at this point. I was looking actually at Charlie McAvoy.
Okay, but you're happy that it worked out. It was a happy accident, let's say, apart from the injury.
Yeah, I thought it was worth a pick maybe 2 rounds later, but he's got a good floor with all the his peripherals and the shots he takes. So I was not too bummed out about this accident.
Okay, so if I look at rounds 12 to 18, then I know you mentioned earlier that you consider yourself somewhat of a hyperactive manager. Only one of your picks from the 7 rounds from round 12 to 18 actually remains on your roster. So that's Kevin Hayes from Philadelphia. So it's quite clear to see that you're obviously a big streamer. You were happy enough and quick enough to drop those guys. Let's have a look at some of the guys who you added on waivers then. So you mentioned Jake Muzzin, who you may consider keeping longer term. You got Vitek Vanacek in, I presume, after Samsonov was ruled out. He's put up some good points for you since.
Oh yeah, I've been pretty happy to hone him since Samsonov was put on the COVID protocol.
Very good. I think he gets the start again tonight. Samsonov still isn't quite back, so
and I think he'll challenge him for more starts once he came back, because Samsonov wasn't playing that well before he got, I don't know if we should say injured or sick, but
yeah, absolutely. I think that Vanacek will be pushing for a 1A, 1B type situation there in Washington. Let's have a look then. So Tyler Myers is another guy who you picked up. I know he probably wouldn't be the flavor of the month with Habs fans at the moment after injuring Joel Armia. You're happy with picking him up? I know I had him myself in a different league, and he's kind of replaced nearly Alexander Edler as the peripherals guy in Vancouver.
Yeah, and it's a streaming spot. So just since I picked him up, they've had 2 weeks of great schedule, so I haven't pushed him out of my lineup yet. But I don't necessarily intend to keep him long term. So far, he's getting some points with his peripherals, and it's helping a little bit. But it's more of a streaming option so far.
Yeah, and one other guy who I can't ignore at the bottom of your waivers here is Nikita Kucherov, who you added for a $2 waiver right back at the start of the season. Are you hopeful of him returning, or is that just a shot in the dark?
I'm less and less hopeful. I gotta admit, I just figured out this week that he can't really come back because of their salary cap situation. Yeah. When I picked him up, I mostly misremembered the Patrick Kane loophole, if I should say, from a few years ago. I thought he came back after the trade deadline, but
yes.
and I looked it up this weekend. He actually returned just for game 1 of the playoffs. So
okay,
if like a Stamkos or any guy on this team that's really has a high salary is injured to finish the season, I could see him come back.
Yeah.
So I'll keep him in my RR spot for as long as possible.
Yeah, $2 didn't exactly burn a hole in your pocket. You're not going to miss that $2, hopefully. Are there any players, Julien, who you had a chance to draft but you missed and maybe regret?
Yeah, coming back to my Binnington pick, I was eyeing a lot Nick Keeler's, and he was so far in Yahoo's list, so I was sort of hoping people would forget about him a little bit. So if I didn't take him, if I didn't take Binnington in the 6th round, that probably would have been my choice. And then, but I thought, you know what, he might still be available in the next round. And I was in a tough spot, being drafting 8th out of 14. I was like in the middle of it, and all my picks were pretty far apart from each other. So he went like 9 picks later, so I got burned.
And then on the other side, are there any players who you targeted but missed, and maybe that you're glad that you missed?
Well, so far Anthony Manta. I don't. I was pretty bummed that he was picked when he was. I think I had him for the next pick, my next pick after that, but he's not playing on the first line, and he's not getting shots on goal as much in the last few years. Goalies like Frederick Anderson and Carey Price, I was looking at them, and they're giving up a lot of goals. Even Carey Price, since the Avs are doing fine, we're not talking about it so much, but he has not been really good so far.
Do you see Jay Garland maybe challenging for that?
Oh no. The Montreal Canadiens will live and die on the Carey Price hill. And I also thought Capo Caco could have a great sophomore season, but I plan on taking a flyer on him later in the draft, but he's not even on the roster right now, so that doesn't look good.
No. You can kind of see the improvements that Jack Hughes has made this season so far compared to how he did last season, but you're not seeing the same out of Kako. And indeed, the New York Rangers in general really haven't really impressed in the way that a lot of people thought they would. Let's take a look, Julian, at your season so far. So your first week in the Cupful was a defeat back in week 1, but you managed to recover from that with a 15-point win in your second week. That came despite being heavily outscored on the Sunday night, where your opponent had Connor McDavid scoring almost 20 points with a goal and 4 assists. Did you watch the scores live on that Sunday evening? Were you kind of nervy?
I always look at the scores live until I go to sleep, but it's funny because it was so close for most of the week last week, and I wrote to the other GM I think on Thursday or on Friday morning, and just to tell him, like, at this point I don't really care who wins, as long as it remains close like that. It's fun to watch, and it's keeping me on the edge of my seat a little bit. And then I had a pretty great night on the Saturday, and I was pretty much too far for him to catch up, despite McDavid's best efforts.
Yeah, that was quite a performance on a Sunday night, and to have a player score that many goals and assists and still lose the matchup must have been a bit heartbreaking. Having a look at this week, then you're looking to go 2-1-0 now. You're beating the team who are currently top of your division. You've a 20 or 20 and a half point lead going into, let's say, Saturday evening here, Saturday afternoon your time. You are probably quite confident of getting the win there. Obviously, you don't want to put a jinx on anything, but you must be confident of a win.
Yeah, thanks, Mark, for
Sorry.
If I lose, I'll blame you.
Stat attack curse.
No, but he's got a great team as well, and we were both pretty fortunate that not too many of our players are missing game. I mean, Brad Marchand is not playing tonight for me. That's a bummer, but I'm not comfortable with the 20 points lead. I think it can fade away pretty quickly.
Yeah, indeed. In the Cupful, anything is possible. At this stage, I just want to have a quick fire roster. We're going to call this. So I'm going to give you 2 options: player A or player B. I'm going to give you 6 choices, and I want you to give me your pick off the top of your head as quickly as you can. So it's going to be a goalie, 2 defensemen, and 3 forwards, and we'll call that your quick fire roster. So let's start in goals. Jordan Binnington or John Gibson?
I would take John Gibson right now. I should have drafted him, but he had such a bad year last year, and I didn't trust the Ducks. So
yeah, I took him. I took him in both of my main leagues, in the Cupful and another league that I'm in. No regrets there so far. He's the kind of goalie who will get you, a -4 or a 13-point night in the Cupful scoring format anyway.
Yeah, but it goes again to me not being used to this kind of scoring format, and I'm mostly playing league where wins and starts are all that matters, basically. So
okay. Yeah, I can see then why you would take Binnington over Gibson. He's more likely to get wins, clearly. Okay, let's move on to defense then. Quinn Hughes or Cale Makar?
This year, I'd say Cale Makar, but that's pretty close, I guess. They're similar players.
Similar players, yeah, and we're also very close in the Calder Trophy running last season. I know I know Canucks fans probably weren't too happy with the decision for Makar to be named the Calder Trophy winner. Let's have a look. Let's move on just to the next defenseman spot then. So two guys who I mentioned earlier, Roman Yossi or John Carlson?
I think I'd take Roman Yossi because he's taking so many shots, and yeah, but that's close again. That's two really close players.
Let's see if the next one is close. I know you have one of these guys on your roster. So Artemi Panarin or Brad Marchand?
Well, I don't remember if Panarin was there in my draft. So I guess I'll go with my own guy. I'll take Marchand. He's getting decent shots. Obviously, a lot of points as well. He hits a little bit and he blocks shots. He plays on the PK, so he's already, I think, got 3 PK points this year. So that's a nice bonus.
Yeah, himself and Bergeron are just so far ahead of everybody else in terms of shorthanded points and power play points as well. And I think probably at the start of the season, I would have disagreed with you and said Panarin, but having seen how badly New York have started and now the Pastrnak is back, I think Marchand is at that higher level.
But so far you're asking me questions about players that I both like, obviously. Like, who's better, Mario Lemieux or Wayne Gretzky? They're both amazing. So,
yeah, well, I mean, the stats will probably say Wayne Gretzky, but I'm going to say Mario Lemieux on that one.
I agree.
Good.
He got screwed by injuries.
Yes, injuries and illness. Yeah. Okay, the next one is two guys who we've also talked about already on the show: Conor Garland and Nick Suzuki.
Wow. I guess I'll go with Garland because he's just a shot-generating machine. But that's another close one. Long term, I would take Suzuki. I think he'll be the more productive player in 3 to 4 years. But for this year, I think I'll take Garland. And he's a winger, which are tougher to get.
Yes. Okay. And the last one then, this is it's two guys that we haven't mentioned. Two guys I know you'll be very familiar with: Mark Scheifele and Evgeny Malkin.
I'm worried about Malkin. I thought of buying low earlier this year, and I looked at his stats, and I would have to pay a lot to get him, and I'm not that confident he's gonna turn it around. He would need basically a Crosby injury to start going, I guess. But so I'll take Scheifele.
Yeah, it's hard to disagree with you on that one. Malkin, obviously, as a Penguins fan, I've seen his. I'm not going to call it a decline just yet, but he's had obviously a very poor start to the season. He did obviously have an incredible second half of last season, let's say even just last season in general. He was incredible for somebody at the stage of the career that he's at. But Mark Scheifele, people say it all the time. It's hard to argue with it. He is just so consistent. He'll very rarely go more than 2 or 3 games without a point, and if he does, he'll make up for it with 2 or 3 in the next. He's Mr. Point per game for years and years now.
Over the year, you know what you're going to get. He's been doing pretty much exactly the same thing for 6 or 7 years now.
Yes, and he's the kind of player you want in your fantasy team. You just put him in. You don't need to worry about him. You just hope that he doesn't get injured, which he rarely does. I know he did in the playoffs last year, but yeah, he seems to be just one of those guys you can hang your hat on, that he will be there, he will get you points, and you won't need to worry about him.
Yeah, that's true.
So let's have a look then. If you had one piece of advice that you could give to a fellow new player in the KKUPFL, something that you've learned in your first 3 weeks in the league, either something practical or something philosophical, anything at all really. Is there anything that you've seen so far that you could offer to a fellow new player?
Yeah, well, take advantage of of all the great advice that you can find on the Discord group. That's been a gold mine of information for me so far, so I like it a lot. And if anyone's like me and is joining the KKUPFL prior to have any experience with peripheral stats, I would say for the KKUPFL format anyway, I don't underestimate the value of shots and block shots. They are very valuable. It's consistent stats. Mm-hmm. And I kind of overvalued hits in the draft because, again, it was my first. Most great players who gets a lot of points don't hit that much.
Apart from Ovechkin.
Ovechkin and Tom Wilson.
Mm.
But other than that, you need to give a lot of hits to be valuable, and that's I overvalued that a little bit, but that's okay.
That's some sage advice. So my final question for you, Julien, just before you go, this is your chance to nail your colours to the mast. Can you give me one player, either somebody who's on your roster or maybe somebody who isn't, who you feel might be flying, let's say, under the radar at this moment and is perhaps undervalued in fantasy hockey terms?
Well, since you're giving me the opportunity, I will preach for my own team, if you allow me. I will talk to you about Kevin Hayes, actually.
Yes.
I really like his spot in the Flyers lineup so far. It's the lines have been changing a little bit in the last week or so, but he's seen a lot of power play 1 minutes so far. And the last time he got a good deployment like that was with the Rangers just before he was traded to Winnipeg, and he was almost on a 70-point pace. So right now his shot percentage is a little bit high, but everything else seems pretty much right. So I am pretty happy to own him, and I wouldn't mind to keeping him until the end of the season. Pretty confident he will keep doing what he's been doing so far.
Yeah, and he's a guy who you picked up in the 16th round, so a very, very low risk, high reward there. He's also a guy who, something that doesn't often come into fantasy hockey conversations, in particularly in 1 year leagues, is the amount of money that he's being paid by Philadelphia. I know it doesn't mean a whole lot, but when somebody's getting paid, I think is he getting $7 million a year? I know he's on a big contract.
Close to that, anyway. Yeah, I believe. But yeah, he's got a long-term, pretty costly contract. So yeah, they want to make him work, and I think Evgeny likes him a lot. So I'm confident. I don't know how much of this is sustainable for the next few years, but I don't think we talk about it so much. I don't recall hearing Elon or Brian talk about him on the podcast this year so far. So yeah, I think he's pretty valuable.
Perfect. Thanks again, Julien, for coming on to speak to me today. It's been really enjoyable having you on. Very welcome to the KKUPFL, and we hope to see more of you in the coming years, and all the best with your climb through the ranks.
All right. Thank you very much, and it's been fun.
Thank you, Mark and Julien, for that insight. Before we get to the player and manager stats this week, a quick minute to shout out some of those that made this podcast possible. A big thanks goes to Kevin Hebert for his hard work on the statistical views you'll find on KKUPFL.com. Check out the About Us page for one of his latest creations, a world map showing the truly global scope of the KKUPFL. Also a shout out to jnsoftware.ca. JN Software is a software and soft skills training and consulting company. It was started 19 years ago by my wife Joy, and since then has grown to have operations across Canada and North America. Make sure to press the free webinars button in the top right corner of jnsoftware.ca. This month's webinar will help you learn the basics of the diagramming tool Visio, while next month's focuses on note-taking program OneNote. You can also watch previous webinars on topics like Power BI, communication skills, making accessible documents, and building access databases, and more. If you enjoyed listening to the Stat Attack podcast today, I encourage you to check out jnsoftware.ca and see if there's anything we can help your organization with. Now back to the show. Up next is our players analysis section. First off, we have the team of the week. These are the best fantasy performers from the last 7 days. In goal, Andrei Vasilevsky with 22.85 KKUPFL points from 3 wins and only 4 goals against. But honorable mention to Jake Allen for getting 20.5 points in 1 less game. Defenders this week are Jeff Petrie with 35.5 points in 4 games against Ottawa and Vancouver. Yep, that'll certainly help things. And Quinn Hughes, a distant second, with 22.5 points, including a 3-assist game against Montreal. At left wing, out of nowhere, Alex DeBrincat with 34.75 points in just 3 games. Huge shot numbers, 4 goals and 2 assists against Carolina and Dallas of all teams too. At right wing, who else? David Pastrnak, 38.5 points, including a 3-goal, 1-assist game against Philadelphia. And at center, Joe Pavelski, squeaking out a win by 1/4 of a point over Austin Matthews with 24.75 points on the back of his 2-goal, 2-assist game in Columbus, February 2nd. All aboard for Transaction Junction. Big-time pickups this week included Jordan Staal, Joel Farabee, Tim Stützle, each picked up in 15 or more divisions and only dropped in 1 or 2. Cody Glass wins the Perfect Attendance Award for showing up to all 11 of the teams that claimed him and surviving the week, not getting dropped by any of them. While Jordan Greenway showed up for his shift at In-N-Out Burger, being picked up in 13 divisions while also being dropped in 14 the same week. On this week's episode of the hit fishing show Cutting Bait, it's Tristan Jarry, with 6 divisions finally giving up on him and no one picking him up in any division. Make sure to check out the transactions page on KKUPFL.com under the Stat Attack menu for more information. This week's Fab fans are Jesse Pugliarvi, who continues to be the highest paid player in the KKUPFL, with the total Fab spent on him this year now approaching $250. Meanwhile, Joel Farabee's hat-trick last Sunday has created a second flurry of buying on him, putting him into the lead for the most picked-up player of the year, having been added 43 times now, in a KKUPFL which only has 23 divisions. Let's see if he'll stick around longer than he did last time on these teams. Now it's time for Who's Rostered and Who's Not Stirred. Top season-long performers who aren't rostered in all 100% of KKUPFL leagues include the now-injured Tyler Mott, Andrew Kopp, and Christian Dvorak. They're all still available in 1 or 2 divisions. However, as we learned from the player stats page on KKUPFL.com, a major portion of the points gained by these players comes from goals, with Dvorak scoring as many goals as Mitch Marner, and Mott as many as John Tavares. How will their production continue over the rest of the year? Keep an eye on KKUPFL.com to learn more. Overall, 183 players are 100% rostered in the KKUPFL, while 52 players are unique to just one division. The top performer who's rostered in just one division is Mason Appleton and his 41 KKUPFL points. But keep an eye on Chicago's Philip Kurashev, who isn't far behind. Can he maintain his good deployment? And will more people bring him on their rosters before the end of the week? All of this data and more can be found on the player stats page on KKUPFL.com under the Stat Attack menu. And off we go to Manager's Corner. The top 2 in this week's Fast Track leaderboard remain the same, with Doc Gusev and Robert's Neat team having gained the most KKUPFL points overall across all divisions. However, now just 3.75 points separate them. New entrants to the list are 3rd place's Shazam Boni, Modern Malkin in 4th, and Nicholas's team in 5th. Winner gets automatic promotion to Tier 1 next year, so make sure to squeeze every last point out of your rosters. The KKUPFL Performer of the Week is Titanium Cranium of Tier 2 Ottawa. His 268.65 points shot him up into 17th in the Fast Track standings. He had a big week from Pasternak, Matthews, Conor Garland, and dynamic duo of Ben and Pavelski, the latter of whom he picked up on waivers earlier in the season. He appears to be running a 3-goalie strategy, with Fleury and Lehner giving him all of Vegas's games and Frederik Andersen playing most of Toronto's. When Samsonov comes off his IR, he'll have some interesting choices to make, or perhaps will be up for a trade. He's running minimal D with only 4 playing at a time, and while having 4 C-only players normally makes filling roster slots difficult, that should be compensated for by having less skaters in general due to the 3-goalie strategy. For this week's Statistically Unlikely, let's talk about the top 17 teams in the overall KKUPFL points Fast Track standings. Each of these teams have accumulated over 900 KKUPFL points so far this season, and find themselves at the top of the pack in a league with 322 participants. However, only 7 of these teams are currently 3-0 in their KKUPFL divisions. Overall leader Doc Gusev is at 2-1, and in fact 17th place Titanium Cranium, who was the Performer of the Week, sits underwater at 1-2 in his Tier 2 Ottawa division, thanks to missed games from Pasternak, Ben, and Pavelski early in the season. There are 47 3-0 teams overall in the KKUPFL, but less than half of the top 17 teams hold that honor. So no matter how good your team is, in any given week, anyone can win. This week's highlighted matchup is again from Tier 5's Melker division. Last week saw 2 teams in this division separated by just 0.05 KKUPFL points. But this week, Traders and Shane's team decided to one-up them by tying with exactly 205.15 points. Traders saw strong performances from Backstrom, Hoffman, Hamilton, Yossi, Forsberg, and Gallagher, but was let down by a negative value overall performance by Thatcher Demko and Taylor Hall missing all his games this week due to postponements. Shane's team was led by Patrick Kane with over 30 points, as well as exceptional stats from Trocheck, Huberdeau, and Jamie Benn. Shesterkin also finally broke out of his slump and put up back-to-back 8-plus point games. Going into Sunday, things look good for Shane's team with 6 games to Traders 2 and only 2.5 points separating them. But hero performances from Nick Backstrom and Dougie Hamilton gave Traders a combined 21 points. Shane's team was able to scrape together 23.5 points to bring the matchup to a tie, but he will rue the unannounced last-minute decision in Philadelphia for Sean Couturier to play Sunday, as his 2-goal, 1-assist, 13.25 Cacupful point performance sat languishing on Shane's team's bench. Any number of minor moves can change a tie into a win, but that one has to hurt for Shane's team. In movers and shakers, Abundance of Pasta of Tier 3 Boris still sits atop the moves leaderboard. 22 moves, 4 more than the next manager. In big spenders, this week's big spender is Medal of Conor from Tier 3 Boris and the $21 he dropped on Yossi Puljujärvi. Still winning the overall title is Hilton Swag Team from Tier 6 Bossy. He hasn't made a move since last week, but with just $12 left after 10 total moves, he's still $8 poorer than second place manager High and Draisaitl. Come on, Hilton Swag Team. My understanding of economics is that when you're given money, you're supposed to spend it. Gotta keep that fab economy rolling. And that's it for this week's episode. Make sure to check out Cacupful.com for more stats on players and teams. We'll be back next Monday to review the goings-on around the league. In the meantime, you can reach out to us on Discord, and we'll see you in Week 4.